My research question is, what is the social impact of nonprofit organizations in Detroit?
I chose this topic because I think it's really important to recognize those who go out of their way to help their communities. Nonprofit organizations are a great example of thinking of others first, and they have played and still play a big role in the rehabilitation of Detroit.
According to the Walter P. Reuther Library, in the late 19th century, due to Detroit's economic prosperity, a large number of immigrants from across the country and around the world relocated to the city. This sudden overpopulation caused job scarcity, and many nonprofit organizations and charities formed in order to provide aid to those living in poverty. According to Pamela Owens, CEO of 3 companies in Detroit, most areas of the U.S. were impacted by the Great Depression, but the suffering in Detroit was unusually high because so much of the economy depended on the automobile industry. Pamela Owens further states, by 1914, Detroit was making one half of the world's cars, and by 1929, Detroit was the 4th largest city in the country with a population of 1.6 million and 160,000 people working in the auto industry. But by 1930, auto sales declined by 75%, tens of thousands were put out of work, and banks became insolvent. According to the University of Michigan, the big 3 auto producers, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, drove nearly every smaller competitor out of business. In a reorganization of the manufacturing process, the big 3 introduced new technologies that reduced the need for laborers and often drove capital-heavy suppliers out of business. It is important to identify the causes of poverty in Detroit in order to find solutions. The Handbook of Regional and Urban Economics states, just 7 decades ago, Detroit had an incredibly diverse and thriving community, but only 6 decades later, Detroit's population decreased by 61%, and in July of 2013, the city filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy, the largest bankruptcy by debt in the history of the United States. According to the Century Foundation, education has been a huge factor in Detroit's rapid increase in poverty levels. An annual ranking released shows that 3/4 of the schools in Detroit are underfunded. Around 47% of the homes of the city of Detroit are illiterate, and just 3% of Detroit's 4th graders and 4% of 8th graders meet national math standards. And without a quality education, it's much harder to find a suitable job. There are many nonprofit organizations in Detroit, but one of my favorites is SOAR Detroit, which was established in 2005 and serves about 150 kids per year, with each child's reading improving by an average of 2 grade levels in each year of tutoring. I had the opportunity to volunteer as a mentor this year and learned so much from my experience. Teaching kids how to read while going through their struggles with them taught me patience and perseverance. Effects of poverty in Detroit. According to NPR.org, like other neglected neighborhoods in urban areas, fresh fruits and vegetables aren't easily accessible in Detroit. They're a luxury. A survey conducted by the Focus Hope organization in 1968 shows that inner-city Detroiters were paying up to 20% more for lower quality groceries. The survey also found that the quality of store condition, produce and meats in the city's stores were not of average quality compared to upper income and suburban stores. According to the Metro Times, there are more than 90,000 vacant lands in Detroit, which demand resources for their maintenance or they become even bigger problems. The Michigan Urban Farming Initiative is a nonprofit organization that uses urban agriculture as a platform to promote education, sustainability, and community. CommunityWealth.org states, since 2011, their farm has grown over 50,000 pounds of produce. They also help their community by converting vacant lands into gardens. I had the privilege of speaking with Quan Blunt, who manages the farm, and he told me that food insecurity and vacant land issues are a huge problem in Detroit. He also told me about how he experienced food insecurity as a child, which is why he's so passionate about what he does. Jack Elsey is the executive director at Detroit Children's Fund, and I got to speak with him about what I wanted the final product of my project to look like. He brought up the idea that I should determine whether or not Detroit's nonprofit sector is meeting the needs of its people. I decided that I would calculate the amount of people being fed per day by multiple nonprofit organizations in Detroit. According to the Metro Times, 48% of households in Detroit are food insecure. According to the United States Census Bureau, Detroit's population is 673,104. This means that approximately 323,089 people in Detroit are suffering from food insecurity. On average, Gleaners distributes 96,000 meals per day, including providing nourishing food and nutrition education to 171,000 children a year. Forgotten Harvest delivers 138,000 pounds of food per day to local charities 6 days a week, providing families in need with fresh and nutritious food free of charge. The average human eats about 4 to 5 pounds of food per day, which means that Forgotten Harvest feeds roughly 34,500 people per day. Annually, Michigan Urban Farming Initiative provides fresh, free produce to about 2,000 households within 2 square miles of the farm. Focus Hope provides 41,000 low-income seniors with monthly food packages. And lastly, the 12th Street Food Pantry has provided over 3.5 million pounds of nutritional food to the hungry during their 17 years of service. After gathering all of the data, the percentage formula is used to determine what percent of the food insecure population in Detroit are being fed by the nonprofit sector on a daily basis. After applying the percent formula, it is determined that approximately 40% of the food insecure population in Detroit are being fed regularly. With this being said, less than half of the food insecure population are being helped. But on a more positive note, this means that approximately 129,235 people are consistently being fed by Detroit's nonprofit sector, which is a lot.
I've learned so much about the history of Detroit throughout my research process and volunteering opportunities. I want to thank everyone who helped me along this fun journey, and I hope you learned something and are inspired to go out and help your communities.